Talk with America is live, Brian.
Hello, my friends. I'm Brian McNaught, and I'm going to be doing this first chat for me. I've never done a Hangout before. My colleague Dottie Berry has done hundreds. She's going to be managing all of the technical stuff for us tonight and letting me know all the comments and questions you make. Whenever I would give a speech and I would walk out and they would have all the house lights down and a light in my face, I'd always stop and ask them to turn all the house lights up because it's really important for me to see people's faces. And it's frustrating to be talking to a screen and not having you all in my living room, with all of us in easy chairs, seeing each other's faces and making comments whenever we want. And I would love for it if I saw your faces and also heard your voices, but this system allows us to type in comments, and I hope you'll do that. We're going to spend some time tonight, and if you like it, we'll do it again, but spend some time tonight just being together and talking about our responses, emotional, intellectual, strategic, to the recent election. And I'm going to share, things that have happened with me. Dottie's going to come in and actually talk a little bit about how we met. I think she'll do that in a minute. And then we're going to ask you to share with us your feeling. It doesn't have to be a reaction to anything that I've said or Dottie said, a story that you want to tell or a question that you want to ask. This is a hangout. So I'm glad you're here to hang out.
Hey, Brian, it's great to be here. Would you like me to go ahead and tell them how we met?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. I'm Dottie Berry, and one day I went to this great independent bookstore in Lexington, Kentucky. I knew that there was a magazine there, honestly, that had this article on my business. And I was looking for that. And right there, as I opened up the magazine, was about this guy named Brian McNaught. And I was just starting to do some corporate training, diversity training at the time, many, many years ago, when I think I was the only person who came out in Leadership Lexington, and that caused a big stir. So anyway, I was doing some corporate training, but I see this guy, Brian McNaught, and I think, oh, I've got to get in touch with him. So I did, me and my thinking, I was like, hey, maybe we could do some things together. And he was so sweet. He said, why don't you come to the Thornfield Sexuality Week? And I was like, well, what is that? Well, as they say, the rest is history, because I was so grateful to get there and meet Brian and see how talented he is in, just how he presents information and his diversity training. And that led me to meet a lot of other great people and start my doctorate work in human sexuality. And then all of that led me to now having been working with the transgender community every year at Esprit, facilitating the SO and couples groups for about 13 years now. So Brian, without me walking in and meeting you between the pages of a magazine, I think most people met you between the pages of your book. I didn't even know you had a book then. Yeah. So I'm very grateful for you and all that you have taught all of us along the way. And it's great to be here with you tonight. I know we're going to have a good time. And we're going to, honestly talk about some things that have been very, very challenging for us. So I'm going to turn it back over to you and we'll get started, okay?
Terrific. Let me first, if some of you are guessing where Dottie is from originally, it's Ireland. If you guessed it was Ireland, you're right. It's Georgia, actually.
Brian, I usually tell people that Robbie will interpret at the end of the speech or talk or whatever, but she's listening tonight, so I don't know if you can interpret for me later.
Well, we used to have cousins that lived in Dallas, and when they would visit, we'd go inside and say to our mother, we don't know what they're saying.
I can understand that. I appreciate it.
So my feeling about how I've experienced the election is obviously like many of you, and I don't want to assume that everyone who's with us tonight is somebody who voted for Hillary or did not vote for Donald Trump. I hope anyone feels comfortable, but for those of us who voted for Hillary, I think we woke up and it was like we had been in a traffic accident. It knocked the wind out of you. Even if you had stayed up in the middle of the night to hear that is the way it was going. And it was like I was in a new world. It wasn't my world anymore. It was like Bizarro Land, from the old Superman comic books. And so like everyone else, I've gone through the stages of death and dying, in terms of shock and grief and bargaining and denial, and then I'd come to resolution, and then I'd start all over again. As soon as I read an article in the newspaper or saw something on Facebook, I'd go back to anger and denial and wanting the Electoral College to change the voter, hoping for things that were going to be different. And what I've come up with for myself right now, and it's undoubtedly going to change again, and I'll post my thoughts on Facebook as it does, but I feel like I need to compartmentalize my what I'm reacting to. I'm very sad and upset that Hillary didn't win. I feel so badly whenever I see a picture of her or read something about her. My heart aches because she would have been so wonderful in my opinion, and she wanted it so much, and I felt it was hers, and she would have been. But so that's one set of feelings. And then the other set is for Donald Trump, and I, like many people, am aghast at the fact that given his moral compass and the things he would say out loud, that he could actually get elected, but he did. And for me, it doesn't do any good to spin my wheels about him. So I put him in a box and said, okay, I might laugh if I see a cartoon with his face on a pig or whatever, but that's not where I want to spend my time and energy. I want to spend my time and energy on myself in terms of making sure that I stay centered, and then my friends, immediate friends and family, if they're there with me. And then, people like Dottie and the others, those of you who are with us, that we build this strong group. And then I feel the thing we've all got to do is just watch what's going on in the country and try to be ahead of what they're going to do, and then take action on, obviously, we can't take action on everything. Each of us has an area of expertise and interest, like school teaching. What are the public schools going to be with this new Secretary of Education that's coming in, this fundamentalist Christian from Michigan who, wants to bring God back in the school? Well, that's not really my area of expertise, but I'd sure be happy to support anyone who asks for my help. I'm going to be watching more on areas that I have some skill. And one of the challenges, and then the other one is, how do we deal with people in our lives, who voted for Donald Trump? Or as I wrote on Facebook, how do we deal with bullies in the street? The people who voted for Donald Trump who happen to be at the Christmas table is one group. And we have to practice how we're going to handle that so that we don't lose it, and that we are constructive in our responses. And then how do we strategize dealing with the bullies that we run into, either at a department store or in a parking lot, who are picking on someone else or picking on us? And so those are all, for me, important areas, but they're not one. It's not one thing. And if I don't separate them, I lose my balance and my direction.
Yeah, Brian, I think you make some good points there. And I know that Robbie and I were in Eastern Washington, that is a pretty traditional conservative area of Washington. And the city we were in, Chelan, is not so much so. But we were thinking we were going to be up the next morning and just having this great breakfast and so excited. And we watched it to the very last bit. I mean, we could not tear ourselves away from it. And I think we both felt like when we went to bed that we were in some kind of nightmare. And when we woke up the next morning, I felt like I was in a nightmare. And I found myself going through a lot of the same feelings that you've experienced. And then I very quickly found out that I was going to be dealing with friends and family. I mean, the bigger things that we're going to have to deal with aren't even here yet. You know, they're here in our minds, like, what are we going to do next in that way? But the friends and family was something that I had to deal with right off the bat. And so, quite honestly, I had to do some do-overs. Like with my sister, for instance, we were talking over one another. I think, Brian, what happened for me is it felt so personal. I felt like with my mother, she's not my mother if she could vote for Trump, because these are not the values she taught me. So it felt so personal. I had to sort of pull myself away from that to understand where they were coming from. And I won't go into that right now. We can share this later, but it was amazing to me what I learned through these conversations with friends and family about what they really feel and think. And I think that's important that we're going to have to do. Like you said, there's going to be strategic things we need to do in terms of upcoming elections. There's going to be things we run into out on the street. And then there's the friends and family. And that's extremely important because those are closest to us, and those probably hurt the most. But I learned a lot, I can tell you that, and just kind of bring up how it was for us in the beginning.
Dottie, do you have some guidance for folks on checking in and also talking to each other in the time that we've got together?
You mean on how to talk with other people? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, first of all, how to talk with us.
Oh, you mean right here? Yes. I want to just say that you can start putting things in over here, and I've been going back and forth. Let me put on my glasses. So what I'd like to do is anybody that's here watching live. Now, I know that some people are going to be coming back later to watch it on the recording. So let me say, if you watch this on a recording later, you can still put in your comments, because Brian and I will come in there and check those and give some feedback or whatever. But those of you who are live here, if you would put something in the comments that you really want us to address, that you need some specific feedback on, or something you want to share, a story that happened, right, be sure and go down there, click on the little box where it says refresh your comments, uncheck that box so that while you're typing, if somebody else starts typing, you don't lose what you were writing. But that's the best way to kind of write now. And one thing I do want to say is there's a button there that says be a Hangout guest or recommend someone. If you could click on that, if you have any ideas for the future, if we decide to do some more Hangouts, if you find them valuable, then you can give us that feedback. And also, when you came into this, you would have received an email where if you want future feedback as far as if we have additional Hangouts, be sure that you accept that subscription, okay? If you don't do that, you won't be able to get the follow-up emails. And if you have done that, if you've confirmed your subscription, then you've got some reminders about the Hangout tonight, and you'll get them in the future. But I'm looking right now to see if anybody is putting anything in. I don't see anything right now, Brian, so I'm going to...
Yeah, let's talk until that happens.
Yeah.
If I can go back to a couple points. One about holiday meals. If we're going to go back into a setting in which family is gathering and we know there are people with different perspectives sitting at the table, I think it's only fair to the person who cooked to have an agreement that there will be no discussion of the election during dinner. That we're going to keep the discussion on Aunt Mary's vacation to Colorado, because if it starts, all the work that the person who made the meal or persons is lost, and I think that's disrespectful, and I think it's not going to help us at all. If we demonize the people, like you, I felt that the people who voted for Donald Trump were personally voting against me.
Yeah.
I couldn't, it was all about me. And so they all had to be homophobic. And I'm sure that others felt, well, that means everyone is opposed to a women's right to choose, or everyone's opposed. That's not the truth. And so it doesn't do us any good to think in that way. because it doesn't make us very good strategizers. The other thing, going back to Donald Trump, we can spend all the time we want writing op-eds and putting funny pictures up to demonize him, but he's not the problem.
Yeah.
If as some people suggest he'll get impeached or disqualified, Mike Pence becomes the president, and he's has a much longer paper trail than Trump does on issues of women's choice and LGBT rights. So I think it's really a mistake to focus on him. We vented, we all, have got it out of our system. Well, and it may not be out of our system. We may have days in which we think about it and we can't get it out of our mind. But I think for me going forward is make sure that I stay centered, make sure that my values are more important than anything, and staying true to them, and then take on an issue that I have some skill in addressing.
Yeah, and Brian, I've just found some comments here, and I'm going to go over some of those and bring those in now. I had to refresh myself on the page because they weren't showing up. So if anybody saw me sort of looking down, I was trying to text Robbie and saying, are there some comments there? And so this is a great thing about technology, Brian. We, it's great when it's working, and when it doesn't work quite right, it makes it feel like the election all over again. Not quite as bad, but
without Russian interference.
Yeah, exactly. And something I wanted to say, Brian, about what you said earlier about how I was feeling was one of the things that just keeps coming back to me is, once I get past me, is Hillary. I mean, every time I think about what she must be going through and what she must be feeling after putting in all the time that she did all her life, and to be so prepared and ready to step in, I can't even imagine the pain that she's in. And that just continues to grieve me. So I think the biggest thing we all can do, and the legacy we can do, is to work to create the world that she envisioned, because that's what we really want. And I know that I found out, and this is what was so amazing in talking with friends and family that voted for Trump. What I discovered is their bottom line and what they want is the same as mine. And I was like, how can this be when we voted two entirely different ways? But I'll share more about that later. But I'm going to go over here and get some of these comments right now and bring them back so that you can maybe address them while I'm over here reading some of them. Let me just go to that page right now. Okay, Shar says, it does feel like a world I don't know or want to know. And Jody, welcome, Shar. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I found that I can mangle any word in the English language with my Southern accent, so please don't take offense, anybody. Jody, I also feel bad that she's having to endure and take all the blame for being a bad candidate, the wrong candidate. Yeah, absolutely. And Shar writes back there, it feels that a woman will never be able to win if she couldn't. All good comments. I'll read some of these, Brian. And Robbie said, good point, Brian. It doesn't do any of us any good to keep giving our energy to the fact that Donald Trump won and Hillary didn't. We need to focus our energy on how we as individuals are going to create positive change in our country. I think that's true. Shar said, I think my brother thought that it is just politics and couldn't hear how personal this feels to me. I can barely speak to him. Shar, I understand that. It's that's happened with me, and I'll share some things that really helped move past that. Friends and family, so important. For one, Robbie says, I need to figure out how I can deal with that without just shutting them out and isolating myself so I don't have to, in quotes, deal. Joan, welcome, Joan. I see you here too. I'm finding I'm experiencing fear that my whole life as I know it is in jeopardy. How to fight that? That's a good question. What can we do about the issues around health care or Medicare? The Democrats are in the minority and have so little power. Okay, just auto-corrected, here, so more comments are coming up. Rudy, welcome. My frustration as a priest is a profound sense of failure in teaching people about real life values, values like love, acceptance, inclusion, compassion, forgiveness. I keep asking myself how people who profess to walk in the footsteps of Jesus could vote for someone like Donald Trump. And Robbie says, I need to remember, like our journey, we need to lean in with love, regardless of whether or not we agree. Doing otherwise only creates more of a divide. Robbie says, I have a good example of how that works that I'm willing to share. Yeah, Robbie, why don't you go ahead and write that out? Jody says, bravo, Dottie, your thoughts about doing what we can to make the world as she envisioned it. Yeah, so Brian, these are some of the things, and I think what we're hearing is some of the fear. I do want to mention this because I thought it was so profound last night, and I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. Last night I heard an interview with Daryl Davis, and for those of you who don't know who he is, there's a documentary that's just come out about him called The Accidental Courtesy. And this African-American, this black man, has befriended the KKK. And over the course of his lifetime now, 25 KKK have come and quit being with the KKK, given him their robes. And he doesn't burn these, he doesn't trash them. He holds these because he says these are a part of history. But his question he would always ask was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Now, I think, Brian, we often say that. We had that similar story in our year-long journey at the end of our newsletters. We would say, you can't hate someone whose story you don't know.
Right.
You know what? When we say that, we often think, you got to know me, you got to know me. But let's reverse that, because that's what he did. And he went in to them. Because here's what I found, Brian. When I defend, like let's say we're talking, if I defend, I take a step backwards. And the next person defends because I said something against them. And we're going like this, defend, 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 defend. We're not coming in closer. So as Robbie says, unless we lean in with love, we're going to be caught in that fear trap. So maybe you can address some of the things you heard me sharing from the comments. I think this is the real meat of it.
Well, and there are several issues involved that if I can back up a little bit, I would be very grateful if someone in this group knew how to write directly to Hillary, because I think one way all of us who care and feel so badly for her, putting it on paper and sharing it with her and making a pledge to work for, not just work, continue to work for, because many of us have been doing this work for a long, long time. And on some issues before Hillary was, good on the issue. Yes. So write to her, and then let women. I know that women feel this far more deeply than men do in terms of the defeat of Hillary and the abuse that she took. Not that it doesn't touch me deeply, but it's about you, it's about being a woman. And there are lots of people who voted against her because she's a woman. And, I'll never, that's why some people voted for Trump. But there's no sense in overanalyzing the election with people who are opposed to your point of view. I would just say, you know what, let's agree to disagree and move on, because that's not what happened in the election is not really important in terms of winning a debate. The point that Robin made and that you made about the man working with the KKK, that's what we have been doing ourselves with putting a face on the issue. When I walked on a stage back in 1974 as a gay person, some woman said she thought she'd throw up. And then she was the last woman to leave because she got so excited, she learned new things. All of us, I think my friend Deb is online. Deb's been putting a face on disability for a long, long time. All of us have been, and that we have to continue to do that. I had somebody say to me today, I want the life that you've got. And I said, you know what? That's why I say the messenger is the message, because we ourselves, if we embody the beliefs, our beliefs and our values, and we don't respond to baiting, we stay above it, we don't try to walk on water. That's not who we are, but we try to embrace the value first of being in the moment, breathing, recognizing that inside all this crap that you see in front of you is divinity of the other person. So, eventually you'll find it and they'll find it. But that we don't, again, jumble everything up. The way we continue to fight for what Hillary believed in is by continuing what we're doing. It's not, we don't have to do anything new, but also remind ourselves over and over again, we won. We won by 3 million votes. And if all the people who didn't vote had voted, many of whom are disenfranchised people, we would have won by even more than 3 million votes. And even though Donald Trump is able to fill his cabinet with, some really scary people, all of my work has not been undone. All of the people who said they're scared, so many of us are afraid that all these years we put in was undone with one vote, and it wasn't. Because in all these years that we've been doing our work, we've created these armies of allies, some of whom are really strong and courageous. And we've got to remember that we don't stand alone. We've got judiciary, we've got people in the Senate who are going to, try to stop some. We're not by ourselves in this.
Yeah, Brian, you are so right. And it reminds me that I thought this work was kind of over. And as I told you the other day, I realize now it's sort of like the stock market. There's always the correction phase, and I don't really like that and stuff. I would rather that, things just keep going up and keep going up. And when Robbie and I took that year-long journey across America, we came back, it was in 2005 and 6, and we were telling people how things were getting ready to change. And back then people were going, "You're nuts." And we were going, "No, we've been talking to the people. We're out there talking to the people. This is getting ready to happen." And so when the things happen and they started happening very rapidly, we weren't shocked. We were expecting that to happen. This time, right, we weren't expecting this to happen. And so what I've had to remind myself is to go back to what worked. And what worked was really listening to the other people's viewpoints. And I'm going to cover this because, Brian, one of the ladies in here said, what did you do, with your mom or family? So do you mind if I share a couple of stories about real things that happened?
Please.
Okay, so let me just share this. I have this great friend for life who was my big sister in the sorority. She's from Texas. Linda's her name, and she's just amazing. Well, I know that she's always supported me personally, and I know that she's always voted in ways that didn't help me. But we've always remained good friends, have a lot of respect for one another. But after the election, I put something on, and here's what you have to know about me. I always try to talk about what I'm for rather than what I'm against. So before the election, my things were always about what I was for, not what I was against. So I tried to do that again after the election. And so I put something from a teacher that was very well written. It was called, "What Do We Tell the Children?" And this was right when the protesters were coming and people were hearing that they were hired and different things. And she came over and put a comment, and in a lot of capital letters, "Well, what do we do with those protesters?" And it's all caps. And if it had been anybody else, honestly, I would have just deleted it. But I gave her a very thoughtful response. And when I did, she went over and gave me a private message and apologized to me and, shared some of why she felt that way, because she grew up in a military family, and she had all these reasons behind it, which made me think, well, I wanted to shout at her, well, Trump just, really demonized one of our great military families, the Khan family, but that wasn't going to help, you see. So I asked to have a phone conversation with her rather than, just trying to write something back and email and so forth. So when we had that conversation, And she again started with her apology, and we really talked out. And she said, I'm not racist. I'm not this, I'm not that. And I said, I hear you, Linda. I don't believe that you are, but I feel that you voted for somebody who through what he said is racist, is this, because this is what he said. And I don't have anything to go on but what he said. And she said, well, you know how I feel about that. And I'm not for that on immigration and these kind of things. And so then we just got to talking about, well, why did you vote for Trump? And she said, because I want this world for my children and I want things to be better financially. And so the bottom line was she wants the same world for the future, but we saw a different method for getting there. And with my sister, I can say that it was a conversation that we didn't get to that point so quickly as with Linda. We just talked past one another, and I ended up writing her an email, and in the subject line I put, well, that didn't go very well. Can we have a do-over? Mm-hmm. And when I wrote her that, I said, here's what I would like to do. I said, I don't think I really got to understand what you feel about this, and vice versa maybe. So I took something that's called the Gottman checkup. It's something that Robbie and I use together. And I said, are you willing to do this? And it's a little exercise, and it starts out with your feelings. You don't start with your story, because our story is where we go boom, 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 defending, and we're away from one another. We're not even close enough to hug. So my sister said, yes, she would. So I called her up, and we got out our little sheet, and I said, you can go first or I'll go first. And so she said she would go first. And lots of times when we get in this, we go into what's called the fight or flight mode. And boy, we are just off the chart, and our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate rises, and that's when our other faculties shut down. We don't hear what somebody said. But if we start with I feel, well, she said what she felt, and then I said what I was feeling out of our initial exchange, and guess what? We were feeling the same thing. We were feeling not listened to, all of these things that we felt. So guess what happened when we both recognized we had the same feelings? We went, we kind of like went in towards each other. And then the second step of that is we tell what our story is. Uh-oh, we just lost Brian. Oh, there he's coming back. We'll make sure he gets back. But in the second step, rather than just saying what our story is, we actually have to say my subjective reality is. And so we each shared what our subjective reality was. And then the next step is we have to find something in the other person's story that we agree with. And then in the next step, we have to ask for what we would like differently next time. And then we have to ask what we would like from them differently next time. So we say what we'll do differently next time, and we ask what we need from them differently next time. So that's just a real quick thing. And, for those of you who are on the email list, I'll send out that PDF to people so you can utilize it maybe in some conversations where you need to do a do-over. But what I can tell you from that is that my sister and I, you have to understand it's taken 30 years of me doing this work for my family to really come back in and be willing to have me in their life. So she got to see how that personally was really potentially scaring me, because Robbie and I finally had marriage equality. And she says, wow, I just never thought about how this might affect you. So let me go over, Brian, while you take over from there. And those are just some things that I've done. I tried to go through that very quickly, not to take up too much time.
I think one of the things that those of us who have been in relationship know that it's really important to listen to what the other person is saying, let them talk uninterrupted. If we want to hear what they have to say. And Dottie, that's what you've committed yourself to, is this bridge building. Not everyone is called to do that or is going to be skilled at doing it. You know, some of the people listening with us today say, well, that, you know, I have no intention of talking to my father in the way you did with your sister. You know, thanks very much. I want to know, how do I stop Trump? And that's okay.
Yes.
All of us have to follow our heart, our bliss, do what it is that we feel called to do. I know Jody's on. Jody is a school teacher. You know, Jody's going to know a lot more about the education system and what this woman from Michigan is trying to do to the schools. And, you know, and she can mentor us if we, you know, connect together through, I think Facebook is an incredible tool for us to do that. You know, Deb can give us guidance on disability issues. Everyone has their own skill. Yeah. And you know, you've just offered yours on this. I think the important thing is to remember you're not alone, that lots of people feel what you're feeling, that you don't beat yourself up if you make progress and then lose ground. It takes a while to get used to a death. And that's what happened for a lot of us, is that there was a tragic death. And we've got to figure out how to move forward from it. And you know, for me, if you're talking about the death of American values, we need to learn how to bring it back, like Lazarus. Yes,
absolutely. Hey, Brian, let me read you a few more comments here too. So yeah, I was kind of sharing that basically off of Donna's question, you know. And yeah, Donna, and I've continued to have conversations with my mom and really try to understand. One thing I know is that she has bought into some things that friends have told her, things that literally weren't true about Hillary. And you know, those are the kind of things you can't argue.
No, you can't, because they watch a different news source than you do.
Absolutely.
You can't compete with Fox News.
Yeah.
You know, but what you can say is, Mom, all of that aside, let me share with you, if I can, how what you're saying makes me feel. Yes. Not what I think, but how I'm feeling talking to you right now, and how I feel about the fact that you voted for him, what it does to me personally.
Yeah, and that sort of ties back into when you got lost and had to come back on, a little bit of what I was covering there, because of some of the questions here that are being asked. But some of the other things, comments, I just want to read to Brian, because he's not looking at this right now. I'm keeping him right there on the Hangout. Joan, thank you for this. I do not understand why everyone is not concerned. So many people pay no attention or minimize the importance of what is about to happen. Are they ignorant, uneducated, or just overwhelmed with life? How do I stop myself from wanting to just shake them, yelling, what is wrong with you? I would rather teach or educate them to the importance of what is happening, but it's so hard not to get angry. So I'll stop with that one before I read the other one. So Brian, perhaps you can respond to that.
We have to accept that a lot of people have absolutely no concern. The woman who cuts our hair up in Tupper Lake, she and her husband, really nice people, don't read the news, national, international, or local. They raise their kids, they get out the door. And when I would ask her what she thought about the Iranian, she had no idea what I was talking about. So we have to accept that and not belittle them, and just understand that some of us feel called in our life to be activists, and our hearts and minds are fine-tuned to be sensitive to the needs of others, and we lead by example. You know, others will admire us for speaking up, even if they don't, right? But they're not all going to care about what we care about, even if we go into the streets. You know, although I do believe that at some point a massive march is probably going to be called for, where, you know, people, I know that there's going to be a Mother's March during the inauguration, but I'm talking about, you know, all of the groups coming together at some point to make it clear, not just in DC, but in every city, that you're dealing with thousands and millions of people here, and you need to pay attention to us. Because I'm not sure that my letter to my congressperson or my senator, who is Mark Rubio, makes any difference whatsoever.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Brian, I will offer one thing that we discovered when we were on the journey is that we realized there were three groups of people. And one group was what we called the uninformable. The next group was the uninformed. And notice I didn't say stupid or uneducated. And the third group was the informed. And what we found is that the majority of us, all of us, about something, in our lives are uninformed. So when I'm uninformed, I have to get information. But the uninformable, and maybe we have friends and family that fall into that category that don't want to be confused with any facts that are contrary to what they believe. And they're not going to change until something happens for them personally that makes them move into the uninformed and start scratching their head like, gosh, I got to figure this out.
That's right.
The informed are often as small a group on the other end as the uninformable. And the informed are just those kind of people who are always trying to figure things out, and they're seeking and they're learning. But the majority of us, on any issue, you could bring up a lot of issues, Brian, that I am uninformed about, okay?
Yeah.
But if I started studying that, I might go to that informed category. So I think the good news and what I'm trying to share is the majority of the people in our country are in that uninformed group. They're not stupid. They're not uneducated. They're just uninformed about something, maybe about gay people, maybe about this or that. So,
but Dottie, the problem, the problem is that they're uninformed, but when they go to get information, they're getting misinformation. And that's one of the horrible things about, and most challenging things about where we are today is that people from my generation used to turn into one of three networks to get the evening news. Now you have people in Moldavia, 16-year-olds, who make up stories about Hillary, about everything, and they put it online, and people actually, and they were interviewed and said, well, why do you do this? And they said, because we're bored.
Yeah.
So we can say you need to get informed, but we also need to provide them information that we trust is accurate and trust that they're never going to have access to. But far more important than that article is what you just said, is when we personalize this with our families and friends and neighbors to say, hey, wait a second, that's really hard for me to hear. I have a friend who's affected by this, or you're talking about me, then it becomes personal to people.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. What we discovered about that uninformed group is by our interactions with people, that's what changes things. Like Daryl and the KKK. Those 25 people that have changed, and somebody might not think that's a lot. But if every one of us were to interact with people that are uninformed, only to let them know how it impacts us and how we feel, and check in and find out how they feel and how they feel like it impacts them, then that relationship is what can change things. And so, it is one person at a time, and that's hard to think about sometimes. But that's how, Brian, we know that's how we did it before, and that's how we're going to have to do it again, because we're not going to change masses of people, but we can start with friends and family that we know.
Well, and I know you're going to check messages right now, Dottie, but the article about the head of the white separatists organization said that their next goal is college campuses.
Yeah.
Because they know that a lot of students are sick of political correctness, and they're going to go say, well, we represent you because we're sick of it too. We have to make sure that we're there before they are. And we need to explain that political correctness is actually respectful language, inclusive language. It's not that you've made a mistake and you're going to get corrected. It's that I'm going to teach you how to say something that includes me too, because I know that was your intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just go to some of these comments real quick here, Brian. A question: how do we combat fake news? Shar has asked that. We'll come back to that in a second. Bill says, yes, figuring out how to help people get informed without sounding like we are pursuing an agenda is a challenge right now. Yeah, and that's why I was talking about, it's really listening to, like, is a simple thing as, well, how long have you felt that way? I mean, that is such a simple question for somebody when they say something. Most of the time we're trying to think of what we're going to say next. But if we just pause and ask them something about what they just said to dive a little more deeply into it. Here's another comment. Joan said, is that they're uninformed or don't care about being informed. It is much easier to believe a lie than to seek the truth.
Especially, and this is really important, if you're asking someone who's part of a group, be it a church group or military group or whatever the group that is, to believe something that's not believed by the other members of their group, such as it's okay to be gay, they fear losing camaraderie and community. They may secretly agree with you, but unless it's personal for them, like a son or a daughter, it's really hard for them to take a stand. So it's better to go with the group and move on away from you, because you're just going to make it hard for them if you hang around too long. Going back to the question about fake news. Yes. We have to keep pushing the media, all areas of it, bloggers, and I think, what is it? 64% of people get their news from Facebook and the internet. I mean, it's a huge amount. You can't just be writing the New York Times and saying you've got to, correct this stuff. We've got to track it down where it's coming from. If they're not going to change, then we have to, we have to accept and not beat our head against the wall. But we've got to keep putting the truth out as much as we can, which may mean if we see an article and we track it down to make sure that it's accurate, then keep reprinting it so that people see it. It's one, small step. And all of us have networks, I don't know. I mean, each of us on our friends group have tons of people that the other person doesn't have. So if we keep sharing things that we see, we build this network of fellow fighters.
And if you even think about, Brian, starting with something as simple as what we're doing, I mean, if we have another one in the future and we all bring more people to the table and we continue to grow that, where a big community voice is being put together. And again, should we have one of these in the future, if you all think it would be a good idea, then we'll get more voices on here. This Google Hangout that we're doing can actually have up to 10 people in here, and us calling on those people like Brian and I are doing. An unlimited number of people can watch, though. And so, it's great to be getting your feedback and your comments. I'm going to go back over here, and I know that I think it was Jody was the one that said she was willing to write to Hillary, so that's great. I think, did you say Jody's a teacher? And she said Bill Mayer, after the election, put on a blue cap that said, "We're still here. Yes, we need to find ways to unite and show how many of us are committed to each other and not being ignored." And I think that's so true. Simone
there was a piece in the paper, I think the Times, that said a lot of us who are veterans, thought that we could retire, and we can't. We've got to, even though we thought we could after 8 years of Obama, we can't. We've got to, we have to put back on the gear and get back into it.
Hey, that's great, Brian. And Kathy Salmon's a good friend of mine. She had told me that she would come on if she got back from where she needed to go, and she's here. And her comment is, in St. Louis at our Catholic church, our deacon gave a great homily about how we needed to start to stand up to the people that use the Trump election as a green light to put people down, cause harm to people, and openly degrade certain people. He said that he realized that many Catholics voted for Trump for pro-life reasons, but we still need to support the people that are being singled out because of the hate that was perpetuated by Trump in the elections. This same deacon has now left our church because of the great pushback by the congregation. This is a type of situation that causes fear in me. Now I have to deal with the pain of leaving the church that I have been a member of since 1989. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Kathy. Yeah. And you know, people are feeling like they have gotten a free ticket to go out and be emboldened in such ways. And so we do have to be willing to
Call them on it.
Step up and call them on it. Here's something that Robbie shared. I'm going to share real quick because her example of leaning in, she says, imagine that you're driving on a busy street and suddenly a car cuts you off. If you're like me, you might say some nice, not so nice things to that driver. Oops, it refreshed. Hang on one second. I've got to follow my own advice and click that little button so that it won't refresh on me. And so sometimes I say some not so nice things to that driver. Then imagine that at the next stoplight, it's really a long one, and you sit there and wait for the light to turn green. During that wait, the driver that cut you off gets out of their car now in front of you, runs back to your car and taps on your window. If you're like me, you might feel like fighting in that moment, but then you decide to open your car window just a crack to see what that person wants to say. I'm reading down here. And then you hear them say, I am so sorry, I didn't see you. Please forgive me. Well, now, what would I do? What would you do? I know what I would say. Oh, it's okay, no problem. Suddenly the wall or the divide, in that instance, it's a car and a window, is taken down and we connect as human beings. When we do that, lean in, everything changes. We experienced that so much while we were on our journey, while meeting people who disagreed with us and believed us to be, quote unquote, sick and sinful in need of healing and forgiveness. And so those are the kind of moments, Brian, that are happening right here on Facebook. You know, people feel like that veneer, so to speak, of social media. They're saying things they wouldn't dare say to people in person. Are you seeing that happening?
Well, if you know, Republicans and Democrats have double standards. Republicans feel free to say anything they want, even if it's rude, but we Democrats won't. I mean, you know, we're much more polite, and like many marriages, we just have to accept it's a double standard because we don't want to become like them. I mean, I'm not talking clearly about all Republicans, and I'm not talking about all Democrats, but I find that people on the other side of the issues that I care about are much freer with the things they say and the way they say it than those of us who are support, you know, issues of social justice are willing to say. Is it fair? No. But do we want to adopt their tactics? I say no, because we lose the battle then. We become them. You know, I don't want to become them.
Yes, I agree with you, Brian. I think that's, if anything, that we want to make sure doesn't happen is that fear gets instilled in us. We have to make sure that we don't go that route. Now, I want to go over and tell Simone. Simone, in the beginning, before you got on, I had made a comment that if you want to write something, go up there and uncheck where it says auto refresh comments. Because as you're writing and somebody else comments, it'll cut you off before you're finished. You're correct. So uncheck that little box where it says auto refresh comments, make your comment, post it, and then check auto refresh comments again so that you'll see the newest ones coming through. That's a great thing. I just wanted to make sure that people know how they can comment on here. So yeah, if you've got other questions or other situations.
Dottie, can I just say?
Yes, right.
You know, this is the first time for me doing this, and I don't know whether you and I are going to do it again, but I do want to say that hearing you mention the names of the people, many of whom, you know, I know, one is my cousin on that list, I feel like, even though I can't see them, I feel like we're all together. I feel like, you know, I wish I could see them. I wish I could see their faces. But I feel like we're together in this hangout. I also want to make sure, though, that if we decide to do it again, it's not, you and I don't have an agenda. I don't have anything to sell. I just thought, you know, if one of the ways that we're going to get through all of this is if we create support networks. And we do that in our friends page, but if periodically we hang out, but I want to make sure that you and I hear from the people, if they'd be so kind, as those who took, this time away from whatever you'd be normally doing to hang out with us, if you found it useful. And if we did it again, how would you change the format? How would you want one topic, or did you like the free flow, or would you like other people up? And give us some guidance.
Yeah, and I'll just encourage people to put that in the comments, because this is really about you. This is not about me and Brian. We're simply here trying to facilitate this situation, because as it happened, I sort of, Brian, I reached out to you because I was like, I feel everybody being in a lot of pain. I could see it. I felt it in myself. And I wanted this community to sort of come and hang out together.
Right.
And so that's where this all began, with me, having that conversation with you and you saying, yes, I'm agreeable. So I'm going to kind of go back over here and see if we can get any feedback. Let me see.
And we'll close up in a couple minutes.
Yes, because we do want to honor your time, and we really appreciate that you've taken the time to come here. So yeah, Jody was helping Simone out here. Turn off the refresh. So anyway, give us your comments, because we're getting ready to close it up here. We don't want to go past the hour, but we do hope that you'll send this along as soon as we finish here. Brian, people can send the link talkwithamerica.com, and people will be able to share that with their friends, because this is what's called a live Google Hangout. And then when we finish and we put stop broadcast, it will become what's called an evergreen YouTube video, basically, but it will be right there in the box that you're looking at now. So anyway, Brian, kind of take over as we wind up here, and let me go and see if there's any comments. And I hope that people will put in what their recommendations are if we do have another Hangout. We're just here for you and to provide a safe environment is what it's all about.
That's fun. I mean, it is getting close to my bedtime, though.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Let me see if I missed anything that people might want to share. We really appreciate people coming on here and spending some time with us. So I don't see any right now, but let me just say that if you, Robbie said the free flow has been great. Would be neat to hear stories from others on the camera. Yes. And Joan said, since everyone is upset politically and probably will be for some time, why don't we pick a current issue? And there are many that is being discussed or happening, and try to come up with a strategy to deal with the issue of the week. That's a great idea. Chuck says, this was overwhelming for me. I can't think or react this fast. I'm overwhelmed by what is happening and want to withdraw and pull the blankets over my head. Oh, sorry, Chuck. I hear you.
Chuck and I went to high school together.
Yeah. Rudy said one of the things that has been very positive in the Flathead Valley, Northwest Montana, has been the formation of a community-wide group called Love Lives Here. It was formed as a response to a white supremacist group that feels empowered by the Trump victory. So yeah, these are great things. So if there were, let me go back to Joan. If there were a current issue that you might want to see discussed, could that be? And also, Robbie, yes, if we gave people the link, some other people could get on. The hard thing is that you kind of have to know a little bit about how to get on the Hangout, as Brian will tell you. Is that true, Brian?
It took me a while to do it, and I promised I wouldn't touch any buttons.
Well, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you learn it, it's okay. So if that's why we're asking people to come on and put in there if they would like to be a Hangout guest. And if you do, then I'll do like I did with Brian, is teach you how to get on that Hangout where we could hear your voice, because that's what we really want to do. We want to hear multiple voices from people. So anyway, let me see.
And
Simone says, as far as changing minds, I traveled across the South, found that many people felt that they were well informed and found no need to look at different sources of news for verification. I like the open format that you're doing. Thank you, Simone.
Time to say goodnight, Gracie.
Yeah. Robbie said stories from others on how they're navigating and creating change, connecting with others. Donna said, wonderful to see and hear you, Brian, and to meet you, Dottie. Said this is so important in many regards to continue at least for a few more sessions. It's a comfortable way to connect with others and share helpful stories. Yeah, and this way, you know, when you all get on here, you can connect with each other. So Bill said, very useful conversation. I felt encouraged listening to you and reading the comments. And again, Brian, let's wind it up, and I will show you how you can go back and see those comments and respond to any of them, because we can do that at any time. Okay, so I'll let you end it up here, right here at an hour.
Well, thank you, Dottie, for pulling us together. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As I said before, I feel like I got a pep talk, and I felt energized by the support and energy of the group.
Yes. Okay, so we will keep you all informed as if we have another one, and if you put comments in there, put yes, we would like to have another Hangout in the future if you want one. Okay, we'll see you all later. Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
Okay.